Hello, everyone. Happy Sunday. Well, I am glad to be here, and I'm glad to have all of you here as well. Um, Especially one of you, Patty. I've been talking with her a little bit over this past week, and I'm so glad she finally got in and was able to be here. So I may have to let somebody else in as the time goes on, but for now, I think we're going to get started. So a few housekeeping things. First of all, you've all heard it before, but we're gonna keep we're gonna keep everyone's mics and videos muted for now. Towards the end of the oops, one second, one more. Okay, all right. So I'm just gonna start over because this is another new face. Hi, Kim. Happy to have you here. The way we do it is we keep our mics and videos muted. For now, I want to make sure that everybody can feel like they have their privacy intact if that's something they want to do. And so towards the end of the call, we'll probably open it up a little bit for some question and answers. I'm really curious to see what you guys think about everything I have to say today. So I would love to hear what you have to say about that, as well as whether or not last week's calculation of your day of your own death had any lingering effects as we went along this week. Another little housekeeping thing I wanted to tell you all about is that I have gotten off of social media. It's not an official thing where I went and deleted everything, but I made a choice about 2 weeks ago to really disengage and not be on it every day to see how it affected me and my own mental health. And I've been pretty astounded so far at how much better I feel. And so, I feel a little weird being like not fully plugged in, but it's also allowing me to kind of stabilize quite a bit and just be a little bit less up and down because as I'm sure everyone here knows, like things are just so tits up in so many different ways that I've definitely been on this roller coaster of emotions and whatnot. So not being on social media has been a really good practice. So I'm sure I'll be back there. I'm still checking messages occasionally. So if you're contacting me on there, I'll probably see it, but I'm not spending all this time scrolling anymore. And that feels pretty freeing since I've been doing that since like 2012 or 2004 for Facebook, if we really want to go way back in time. So, let's see. So yeah, last week we talked about calculating the day of our own death. And so the reason why I calculated that many, many years ago was because I found that quantifying my life made it more manageable. Because for me, emotions were all over the place all the time. And so, I think we've all felt, especially if you're in the depths of depression or you're in the depths of antidepressant withdrawal, that your world is spinning really fast. There's so much going on, and yet there's a part of you probably intellectually that knows that, maybe everything is not wrong. I know that for me, I could be having a complete breakdown during antidepressant withdrawal, like to the point where I was sobbing so hard I couldn't actually like catch my breath or just I could not function. I mean, puffy face, snot all over, just really just a rough kind of breakdown. And yet there was still a part of me that was kind of like, knew that it was emotional and knew that I had a roof over my head. I had food in my refrigerator. I had the things I need. And yet I couldn't figure out how to connect to the gratitude, because so much of the time what we hear is, oh, we need to be grateful for what we have. But for me, I couldn't get to gratitude. It felt like too much. It was just way too big. So I developed a way to take baby steps and get more and more towards winning life, if you will, more and more towards happiness, because everything I read about happiness, everything in the women's magazines or whatever I was trying to, gain inspiration from, seemed to be this quantum leap. It was like it was asking me to be someone that I wasn't and be someone that I didn't know. I couldn't understand how to even start to be happy or how to start to learn the skills I needed to learn. And that's where today's lesson comes in. So today we're going to talk about this idea I developed called I call it the 51% theory. Sometimes I also like to call it factual optimism, which just kind of delights me as a phrase. So I'll get into that in a second. But before I start, I just want to read you guys another quote from the Stoic philosopher geniuses, this one from Mr. Marcus Aurelius, ruler of the Roman Empire. He lived from 121 AD to 1800 AD. And despite the fact that he was in charge of all of Rome, he did a lot of musings and reflections on his life and what it meant to lead a good life. So I want to read this quote, and I'll read it twice so we can digest it really well. All right. You must build up your life action by action and be content if each one achieves its goal as far as possible, and no one can keep you from this. But there will be some external obstacle, perhaps, but no obstacle to acting with justice, self-control, and wisdom. But what if some other area of my action is thwarted? Well, gladly accept the obstacle for what it is and shift your attention to what is given, and another action will immediately take its place, one that better fits the life you are building. One more time. You must build your life action by action and be content if each one achieves its goal as far as possible, and no one can keep you from this. But there will be some external obstacle. Perhaps, but no obstacle to acting with justice, self-control, and wisdom. But what if some other area of my action is thwarted? Well, gladly accept the obstacle for what it is and shift your attention to what is given, and another action will immediately take its place, one that better fits the life you are building. So essentially what we're talking about here, and what Marcus is talking about, is that one little action begets another action. And that's true across our whole lives. And sometimes we tend to look at our issues, at our problems as these huge obstacles. And for something like depression or antidepressant withdrawal, where it can be so all-encompassing, it is so easy to get wrapped up in the idea that this is the thing that is consuming our entire life. What is the worth of a small step? What little brick that I can lay down, how does one brick help me fix this huge problem? And again, it's because it's all emotional and we can't conceptualize that one little brick will help fix the emotional problem. And that's where my technique comes in. So before I get into the way I developed my technique, I want to mention one other thing, because sometimes it can be helpful to create sports analogies. So the University of Alabama coach, Nick Saban, had a philosophy called the practice. He was a football coach, I believe. And so the idea of the practice is that instead of focusing on the big picture, we focus on the absolute smallest things and do them to the best of our ability. So in the case of practicing for football, that would be practicing with full effort, finishing a specific play with integrity, converting all of the turnovers and the possessions. Just focus on that one little thing. Because the thing is that a game is made up of a series of small things. So if your only focus is the small thing, we build. And eventually, if you do enough small things right, you're going to win the game. And that's what he found, was that the teams that focused on the smallest things and did those well tended to win. And the benefit of that was that they won without having to focus on the obstacles directly. So instead, it wasn't playing against the biggest rival that was the problem. It was simply just, if you have the ball, getting it to where you need to be. That had nothing to do with the problem at hand. And this takes away a level of pressure that we can put on ourselves that I think is really important. And we can apply that to our own emotional state and our healing and happiness as well. So that's where we get into factual optimism, or the 51% theory. Okay, so the way I thought about this was that if I could say on my deathbed, if, hypothetically I was cognizant enough to be able to look back, I could say that the majority of my time on earth was happy. And if we look at what the word majority means, I think we like to think that that means, oh, I look back and I think of nothing but happy, lovely things, which is we all know we're all here because our life is not going that way. And I don't know if most people's life tend to go that way. But majority means 51%. That means 51% of the time, our days were better than not. It's a really small amount when you actually think about it. It's just one, if we've got a little seesaw here, right? There's always something that's going to tip us to one side or the other. That's that small 1% in the 51%. But if we're thinking of a seesaw, the second it tips, we're on a plank now, or sorry, we're on a hill now. If you've got a wine bottle rolling down your seesaw, it's going to go down at a 1% degree. So in my mind, if I could say that 51% of my life was good, that by my definition, then being alive was worth it. Now, deep in depression, to me, there was no way you could ever talk me into getting to like an 80 or 90% happiness level. I simply did not think that was something that was ever going to be a possibility for me. But I could kind of wrap my head around the idea of saying, like, out of 2 days, if one is just a little bit better than the other, I can do that. And I can work towards that. So that was my goal. Now, the way I did this was I started it off, well, actually, I'll come back to that in a second. Part of the reason why this is such a difficult thing for us to, why cultivating happiness is such a difficult thing for us to do is because our brains are finicky. We remember what we want to remember. And once emotion gets involved, we tend to lose all senses of reality. So a good example is if you do something and you get 9 really great comments and positive praise on the thing that you did, and then you get that one negative one, right? Despite the fact that we have an overwhelmingly positive response to the thing that we did, it's that one negative thing that we all focus on. And that's because our emotions twist our reality. We feel hurt and we feel wounded. So for me, knowing that I had this tendency to really focus on the negative and to get wrapped up in the negative emotions, I wanted to find a way to quantify everything so I could look at the quantification and say to myself, well, there's, I can feel like it's been a shitty day, but if I look at the numbers, I can't argue with that. And what that does is start to sever the link between our emotions and the truth of our life and let us step back and look at it in a more objective way, which this is going to help stop the tapes that play in our head or sometimes those deep feelings of, doom or sadness that we feel because we are interrupting that automatic response that we tend to go to. The other thing that I found to be really valuable about this practice was that it took a lot of the pressure off of my little day-to-day decisions because my only goal was to hit 51%. If I got to 51%, every other choice I had made in my life was valid by default. The goal was not 70%, it was not 80%, it was not 90% happiness, it was 51. So as long as I was on that track, I was free to make mistakes. I was free not to be perfect all the time. I was free to just, again, make more decisions that ticked my seesaw in the right directions than in the wrong one, but not by a huge amount. Because if I hit 51%, I'm winning. Everything else is just gravy. So the way I started to do this is that I had a journal that I would write in every night, and it wasn't very extensive at all, just a few lines. And I started to rate my days. So if you think of your days on a scale from 1 to 100, where 1 is the absolute worst you could ever feel, and 100 is the absolute best you could ever feel, I started to plot where my days were and how I felt about my days. When I started this, I was working at my bakery in New York, and I was deeply unhappy. It was not the life I wanted to live in, but I was stuck in it because I had a lease and I had a business partner, and I had an end date on my lease. And we talked a little bit about last week how I started to count the number of days until my lease was over, which led to me counting the number of days till my own death. And this practice also was developed at the bakery as well. Because I really wanted to be able to look back at the time at the bakery and not resent it. And in order not to resent it, I needed to know that over half the time, it was worth it. Again, 51% of the time, that was my only goal. And at the point when I started doing this, I felt like I had one good day out of every 7. One day a week. I mean, it was just really mostly, it was just darkness the whole time. But if we do that quick math, that means about 14% of the time, I was kind of content with my life. That was it. But 14% was not worth all of the tears, late nights, the fights with my business partner, all the business regulations. It wasn't worth it. I needed to be hitting 51% in order for that to be worth it. So I started looking around in my life and tried to figure out how I could take that 14% and turn it into 51. And this is where I learned something really important. Little changes equal big results. We need to focus on the little changes and not the big ones. And I'm going to share my screen for a second because I want to show you guys why. All right. So here we go. Let's see. All right. So I can't see anyone on the side, by the way, while I'm doing this, but this is our trajectory of choice. This is a key here, because if we go down here, where we make our 51% choice, where we change one little thing, even though it doesn't feel like very much at the time, what it does is completely change the path that we go on. And then as time passes, the distance between where we were and where we are now grows. So the more little changes that we can make here, the bigger this shift is going to be. Let's see. Ooh. Yes, there you go, guys. I'm not a doctor, a psychologist, or researcher, a pharmacologist, or PhD candidate, or a politician. My usual spiel. You guys know this. Coming back to you now. Okay. All right, so it's that little tiny choice, right? So for me, one of the first choices I made was realizing that I felt really crappy in all my clothes. I was in my late 20s at this point, and I had all of these clothes left over from college that made me feel like a child. They did not make me feel powerful or like I was a strong businesswoman. And I just really just kind of didn't like how I felt when I put my clothes on in the morning. But I had spent all these years rationalizing that I didn't want to spend any more money. Why would I give away clothes that are fine? And so I just every morning made myself feel just a little bit worse by putting on these clothes. And so the first choice I made was just to get rid of the clothes. Now, this was a very easy decision for me because I didn't want my clothes, so I just got rid of them. I would say that decision was like an 80% decision. And sorry, I just realized I didn't totally explain something. I'm losing track on my own notes here. All right, so I'm going to backtrack for a second. Bear with me. Okay. Little changes equal big results, right? I'm keeping a note of my days in my journal. But then what happens is, even if we're keeping a note in our journal at the end of the day, our perception at the end of the day can still cloud what happened earlier in the day, right? We've all had something shitty happen to us before we go to bed, and though a day feels like it's just completely up in the air, even though we had a good day overall. So how do we stack the cards in our favor every day? We start applying the 51% rule to our individual decisions. Because as long as that singular decision falls at 51% or higher, we are working towards our 51% overall lifetime happiness goal. Okay? So not only is our big goal 51%, our little ones are too. So this is where I'm saying one of the first things I did was change my clothing. When I thought about the idea of changing my clothing, I would say it was an 80% positive thing for my life. The 20% that was technically a little negative was because it forced me to spend some money that I didn't want to spend on new clothes. But the overall effect was that I felt so much better every day when I put on new clothes that I got that extra 1% little tick of happiness towards my overall lifetime happiness. Every day was a little bit better, small bit, just because I changed the type of pants I was wearing in the morning. And so this brings up an important point. A lot of people like to talk about pro and con lists when it comes to, making decisions. I've never done that, and I don't like that technique because I think pro and con lists tend to address primarily logic while neglecting emotion and intuition. And happiness is fully emotionally and intuitively based. So why are we trying to apply pro and con lists to something that doesn't necessarily add up? But the 51% theory, while it is logic and numbers driven, it's really asking you, how do you feel about a situation? Like, it's very simple. Does it feel good or does it suck? That's all you have to ask yourself in every little single decision. If that decision feels like it will bring you 51% joy as opposed to 49% suck, that's it. You make the choice. You say, I'm going with the 51% and I will reevaluate later. And that's why it's important, because it takes a lot of the thought out of these big decisions. It takes a lot of the anxiety out of it. You're just going for, does this feel good or does this suck? And that's it on some level. So other things I started to do that were a little bit more complicated once I got through the little things like buying new clothes. One of the most important decisions I've ever made in my life was to join a CrossFit gym in 2013. Now, even though this was one of the most important decisions I've ever made, when I made it, I was barely over that 51% mark. Like, I wrote down here, and so it was in my journal at the time, it was about 55%. That meant that almost half of me did not want to do this at all. I did not like getting up in the morning. I didn't like the actual act of working out for CrossFit, and I didn't like how expensive it was. It was $250 a month. But it had this little bit of potential to make me feel better because I wasn't feeling too good about myself at the time. So I told myself I had 3 months. That was it. If after 3 months that 55% had dropped below 50%, I could be done. But of course, that's not what happened. I stuck with it. And that 55% probably jumped up to 95%. And it's been a huge part of my life ever since. And so it started to increase the number of good days I had in a week too. So between my clothes and just starting to go to this CrossFit gym, I was upping my number of good days to maybe between 2 or even 2.5 good days a week. Good, 51%. Again, it didn't mean that they were like super happy, like unicorn sparkly days. They were just content. I defined good as generally content at about 51%. And so just by increasing my one good day a week to 2 good days a week, I was up to like 35%, which is huge. It's a huge improvement. You have no idea how much of an improvement that is on your day-to-day life until you start to feel it. And so then I just applied this technique to all aspects of my life. I mean, literally every decision that wasn't a clear yes or no, I could ask myself how the 51% theory would apply. Will that cake make me feel 51% better about myself or 51% worse? Will I be 51% content to go on an awkward second date, or would I be 51% happier spending a night at home? Will hiring a new employee make life 51% easier, or will the hassle of training will be 51% more of a pain in the ass? Like, it just started to apply everywhere. And the reason is because I knew that as long as I was 51%, sure, my lifetime happiness was going to go up. And that's really the key here. The 51% theory means that all decisions are easy decisions. That does not mean that they aren't difficult in the sense that you may have a lot of consequence, but the actual act of making the decision should be easy. Could be hard to execute, could change your life a lot, but we should be able to know and make the choice, because once that 51% threshold is crossed, Nothing else really matters here. There's no point in wasting time figuring out how to get something that's like a 60% to a 90%. You just make the choice. At 51%, you go. You say yes. Knowing, however, that it's not definite. And that's the other thing we have to keep in mind here. Our life situation changes. Our relationship changes. Everything is going to change. So we do have to reevaluate. If you found that a situation that started at, 51 or 60% falls to below 51%, start getting curious. Start looking at it and saying, well, is this factual drop, this data-driven drop in my life, is it because of my emotions in this time and place? Is it because of external logistics? Did I outgrow this thing? Did the situation change or did I change? It's possible and likely that you're going to have to evaluate and reevaluate to see if getting back towards 51% or more is worth your time. And if it's not, well, we just drop it and it's fine. So now we can kind of wonder, like, if we don't know the answer, how do we make the choice? And that's where I think we all really need to learn how to wait. We have this real, this to me is the thing I'm really, really seeing in the world right now, is that we are so reactionary. There is no real stop and thought between the thing that happens to us, this moment in time that seems to be shrinking, and our reaction to it. And this is a big reason why I decided to quit social media for a bit. It's that there was never, when you're scrolling through, there's never any point to actually process, or never any possibility to actually process your emotions. See how you think about it, see what you want to do about it, and see how you feel about it. Instead, we see something and we immediately respond, which is creating huge amounts of anger and rage and frustration and hatred, and we're seeing it left and right. But there's so much value in stopping and saying to yourself that not taking action is action in itself. It means you let more information come to you. It means you let your thoughts settle. It means you get a chance to not do something you're going to regret. And I think we all need to be practicing that a lot more. And what you'll kind of find here, if you start to practice the 51% theory, is that there are going to be a lot of decisions that hover somewhere around 49%, 50%, and 51%. If it's not clear, it's time to wait. It means you don't have enough information yet to make the choice you need to make. Because otherwise it's going to be pretty clear to you. This is like generally makes me feel good or it generally makes me feel shitty. It's pretty simple. But the middle stuff, you got to wait. You got to get curious. You got to ask more information. And so 3 years after implementing this, my life has changed quite dramatically. So I'm going to show you guys a couple more little graphs here that I really hope you'll enjoy. Give me 1 second. So one of the things I did, and again, because it's not enough for me to just write this stuff down. I need to be able to quantify it and see it. I like visual things. So I literally graphed it, and I would really recommend that if you guys start doing this practice that you graph it. So I'm going to share my screen again. And if you don't have a screen share, no worries. When I send you guys the little PDF at the end of all this, I'll put this in there. Okay, so here's by the numbers. So this is just going through 2016. But you'll notice over here on the left is what I deemed as my lifetime happiness average based on the keeping track of everything for a long period of time. Now, my father died in 2001 and I was only 15, so pretty much anything before that I kind of like don't count because it doesn't seem like the same life. And then now if we go down here through time, my father dies in the middle of this year. The next few years aren't so great. I'm kind of estimating here the way I felt in retrospect because I wasn't doing this practice. But I really started to do this practice around 2012, 2013. And as you can see right when I was doing it here in 2013, I was really, really low. I mean, my lifetime happiness day-to-day average, again, this was like 14%. But if you notice the difference between 2013 and 2014, this is where I started, this is where I started doing this practice. And this jump here is small, but it matters. But it was in 2014 where I started clicking into CrossFit, and that really started making a huge difference in my life. And simply just because by joining CrossFit, by making that one decision, I had an average of one better day a week, that jumped hugely over to 40%. Then I had another series of small decisions I was making that led me to traveling around the world. This is also when I got off antidepressants, by the way. So I was, what's interesting about this, looking at this from a yearly perspective, which is why it's important, is you wouldn't know that 2016 had a handful of the worst months I've ever had in my entire life, because there were parts of it that completely overrode that hell, as we'll see over here. And that's why this is important, right? We want to be able to see that, okay, despite the fact that I had 4 awful months in 2016, on average, I was doing better than I was the year before. And that's a huge knowledge to know as you go through your life. And then I left New York, got out of my business. And when this was taken, I was in probably feeling high on life in Portugal and starting to really feel like I had finally recovered from the antidepressants. So if we zoom in a little bit now to 2016, we can see a bit more detail about how things were going. And as you can see here, this March to July, that was my deep antidepressant withdrawal. The days there were just, I mean, they were very dark. I think one day a week to feel 51% content would be considered an achievement. And you can also see I felt a lot better before I got off the drugs, and then it went to shit, and I had to work my way out of this hole. And I mean, I think there's probably no better representation for antidepressant withdrawal than this, if I'm being honest, because that's what it feels like. You get way into this hole that's worse than you started, and you have to dig your way out. But as you can see, as the end of the year went on and I continued to do the work, my life just continued to get better and better, which ultimately brought me to a relatively higher average. Okay. And so like my average at the end of 2016 was more like six good days per week, which, you just can't really argue with. These days, I'd say that pretty much exclusively, like I'm hanging out around 7 good days a week. It's just the reality. I've had some really hard days, especially in the past couple months. But if I look at it objectively, and I'm able to do that now, it seems it's a lot more manageable. And I know I'm doing much better than I ever had, despite the fact that there's a lot of parts about life right now that are actually harder. And so, let's see, in conclusion, before I start asking you guys your thoughts and opening it up a little bit, I just want to go back to the idea of this seesaw, right? We have our seesaw. And it can tip in either direction, just a little bit. But as soon as it tips in that one direction, that's the direction it's going. So this is why we only need that one little 1% to make us just 1% closer to happiness. It's going to tip us in the direction that's going to start moving us in a way that's going to build. It's the equivalent of only focusing on catching the ball and running during the game, not on whether or not you win the game. You just want to run as hard as you can when you get the ball. If we do that over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, we start to build and we gain momentum and we don't even realize it's happening. And that's where we kind of come back to Marcus Aurelius, the one who says that if we gladly accept the obstacle, which we're all here because there's an obstacle, right? It's here. We've got it in front of us. We may as well deal with it, right? So if we gladly accept our obstacle for what it is, so we're going to accept what it is, move it aside. So if we gladly accept the obstacle for what it is and shift your attention to what is given, or rather what we can control, what we can do about it, Another action will immediately take its place, one that better fits the life you are building. Action begets action begets action. So when we're so overwhelmed, when everything feels too dark and big for us to handle, we need to just think of the 51%. What choice will get me 51% closer to the overall goal? That's it. That's all we think about, and then we make that decision and go. So that is it for my 51% factual optimism theory. So I'm going to open up the floor now. If you would like to add your thoughts on this, or if you have any questions, feel free to either type it in the chat box or raise your hand a little bit. I'll let you all think about that. I'm just going to open up the floor to pretty much anything we want to talk about. I'm happy to go deeper into this and talk more about it. I'm also happy to answer more questions about the day of death. I am happy to answer any more withdrawal questions if some of my new faces here have questions about that you didn't get a chance to see. And while y'all are thinking, Rashawn is saying, if only I could get this organized about evaluating my life. Yeah, I will say it looks a lot more impressive than it is, guys. I mean, like, I just had a notebook, and at the end of each day, I would write my little number, maybe write a few lines, and then at some point, I just kind of sat down with the notebook and put it into a spreadsheet, and then graphed it. Which again, it didn't take as long as it seemed. It really didn't. I used a program called Canva, which had like built-in infographics, and it just made me a nice, happy little graph without me having to really know anything about graphing shit at all, because I'm a little math special. I can do it when I have help, but yeah, I don't know how to do it without a program that knows. All right. So I would love to, I would love to hear from, Rashawn last week was saying that calculating his death date put him in the present moment. Oh no, that was Patty said that calculating her death date put her in the present moment. Patty, would you be open to coming off mute and speaking to us a little bit? You've been so supportive, and I think your journey is just really special. So I would love to hear from you if you're available to do that. I'm going to ask you to unmute. However, if you don't want to, you don't have to. You are welcome.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, Patty. I can hear you, and so can everyone else.
Hi, everybody. I go ahead and ask questions. Last week and the week before that were hair set on fire days. Just a little bit of background. I'm hoarse because I take inhalers for asthma, and I have not hydrated correctly today. I am 62.5 years old. I have had a very interesting life, and I am very open to anyone asking questions as to what happened the last couple of weeks that turned my game around by meeting Brooke,
Aww.
getting on board with getting the hell off of chemicals. Holy God, if we could all just hold hands instead of holding a bottle of pills or booze. What an amazing feat that would be for the world.
Yeah.
So please define exactly what it is that you want for me to talk about, and I will be specific to your question.
Well, Patty, I just from the little bit I know about you that the group doesn't know, I think I would really love to know what it means for you to know that there are other people who understand, because I think so much of the time we all feel really alone. If you could speak to that, I would really appreciate it.
I have, I don't know how in depth you want me to go, so stop me if I go too far. Okay.
We have a few minutes, so.
I've got 2 minutes.
Well, I'm not going to time you, but I'm saying we have a few minutes. So, no hour-long soliloquies, but feel free to take a little time.
Let's just say, excuse me, let's just say that I was not born in the United States. And if I was, I'm lucky, I'm fortunate to be a white woman, but I'll tell you this, that if I had not been a white woman, I would have been dead 40 years ago. I was born in South America to a family who was completely disconnected from any relatives that were located stateside. My family life was completely dysfunctional. When I told my mother what was happening with my father, the next day when I went to school, I was pulled out of my class, told to go to the chapel and pray for my mother, and I heard a voice that was ethereal. It wasn't human, it wasn't me, I just knew that my mother was dead. Those words came through, "Your mother is dead." And I never saw my home or my father again for another 3 months. I was a dump and run child to his family in the States. My mother had committed suicide, apparently, the night that I told her what was happening underneath her nose. And I disconnected. And from that point on, I quit asking questions and accepted anything that would come my way, because I would eat kibble. I would eat anything that anyone threw at me as long as I got paid attention to, because I did not know how to function socially or interact in a family way, and I was never accepted into my pack. So I have been alone almost all of my life. I never have ever received a warm hug that is genuine from anyone other than one person who is my friend, and I have never talked openly about, even though I'm keeping a lot of details. I mean, this could be a book. I'm keeping a lot of details away. Now I find myself in a pandemic, and I'm watching other people who are partnered. I'm not. I have been divorced for almost 33, going on 34 years, have never remarried, one and done. I have no family. There is no one in my life. I am completely self-reliant and dependent on trying to be intuitive and attentive to what you just spoke to, how to find that intuition that gives me the ability to breathe when my solar plexus tightens up and I am curled in a fetal position, and I don't know if I don't know if I can I don't even know if I can open my eyes. The little that 51% thing, that I don't know how I managed to get into this session, but that is exactly how I have operated over the last couple of weeks. And all I can say is, through this pandemic, through our political crises, through our world crises, through all of the hair on fire bullshit that is going on with our planet, because people are so egocentric rather than non-egocentric, is that I had to figure out that I had to determine my death date Do I want to die today, or do I want to use the actuary tables? I actually had a talk with my insurance agent, and I admitted that I was in this webinar session with all these other people that I didn't know, with this woman who was just amazing. She's a lay person with no degree in the divine wisdom of the universe. And this man is a diehard Christian. And he said, you know what? I really don't like Jesus, but I just do it because it's easier than it is to, like, not. So it's just been, the last couple of weeks have been more 51% than not. And I didn't even know what I was practicing. The thing that I have clung to is, if it's not 51%, don't beat yourself up. If you can't get out of bed, it's okay. You've done your best. You're still here. You're still fighting. And you know what, kid? You're going to do it. Did I answer your question?
You did, Patty. You did. If you wouldn't mind muting yourself just for a second, I'm going to respond, and I have a couple thoughts. First of all, thank you so much for sharing more of your story. It's extraordinary. And I think what stuck out the most to me, though, is how much you are fighting for yourself, perhaps without even knowing it. Like, to me, what I hear is that you are someone who is divinely connected, because people who are not divinely connected do not hear voices from ethereal places. And I've heard that too. And I'm going to ask Rashawn to speak a little bit after I finish, because he's another person who I think you need to hear from. But you have this power within you, and I think your challenge is to shed all the crap and step into this. Because through everything you've been through, you have this ability that most people still don't have, that there's a self-awareness there to understand that sometimes if you can't get out of bed, well, that for that day, 51% is staying in bed. And to know that you're taking steps to heal, again, this is things that most people just don't really do. So I think I really just want you to know that the extent of pain you've felt in your life means that there is an equal and opposite force of joy and potential on the other end. There's two sides. We always have the side that balances itself out. So the more work you do, the closer you're going to get to that. And I think that it's definitely could be possible for you. So thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm going to invite Rashawn to unmute himself and speak a little bit. And the reason why I want Rashawn to speak is because Rashawn is also a spiritual healer. And whenever I'm having a hard time, I talk with him, and he always has a way of bringing things into this sort of divine light. And all I could think of when you were talking, Patty, is how I wanted you to hear Rashawn's voice, because if there was anyone who I would want you to have a hug with from right now, it's this man. So I'm gonna invite him to unmute, and I hope he's ready for that introduction that I just gave him. Rashawn, you're on.
Hi, Brooke. You flatter me with this introduction. So lovely. Thank you. And Patty, I definitely would give you a hug right now. Your story really struck me at my heart. It's so powerful, so challenging, and I'm just like in awe and inspired by the fact that you've managed to endure everything that you've gone through. And this is kind of what fascinates me the most. Through things like this and through like the more recent years of my life, I've come into different opportunities of meeting incredible people that just make me so grateful to have shifted into this new path of my life. Brooke being one of them. So I was a very different person not very long before I met Brooke, actually. I'm relatively young. Right now, I'm 32 years old, but I spent most of my life living in a very small town with very closed-minded uh, people that have very, very limited ways of viewing the world. And for me, it's not so much that I didn't feel like I belonged necessarily, but it's just that I had a more expansive perspective that I just was not able to share ever. And or I would always meet conflict when I tried. And so I developed a very strong sense of fear at an early age when it came to speaking my truth, talking about the things that I experienced, the way that I saw the world. And that led me to just like moving in silence, like from my early youth into my early adult life. And that silence it consumed me, and it paralyzed me, where I could not express myself. I couldn't pursue my own um, forms of expression, any dreams that I had, any desires that I wanted to do. I just felt stifled. And it started to get to the point of physical manifestation in my body. I was just quiet for a long time, but then as I grew into working and living as an adult, where I could see myself 20 to 30 years later, this is maybe when I was about 21, 22, I could see my whole life for the next 20 to 30 years as to what it would be. And that vision just shattered me. I was destroyed. I felt like I was trapped. I couldn't talk to anybody because my friends didn't necessarily understood what I was feeling. And it even came into the point of just extreme anxiety and acid reflux. I would go to sleep at night and I would wake up choking, not knowing what it was, and I had to go to a doctor and pay them this insane bill to run 5 or 6 tests just to realize that I was suffering from acid reflux, from anxiety with work and life. And on top of that, I kind of hid myself away in video games of all things, because it presented this escape. Video games and alcohol, really. Alcohol is a part of my culture, a very strong part of my culture. So anytime that I wasn't at work, I was either playing video games just to escape the current life that I was living, or I was out in the club just getting drunk to not feel the way that I was feeling. And it finally came to the point where I was just I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't live this lie. I couldn't pretend to be happy in my environment, or pretend to be grateful, even though where I was living, from the Caribbean. So where I'm living, everybody considers paradise and the lifestyle to be the way that everybody wants to live. But for me, I needed something different. And so I moved from a place where I couldn't make a decision, which is, I'm going to get to it. This 51% thing is just something that's really a brilliant idea on a whole. But my issue is that I couldn't make a decision. I couldn't choose to do anything because I just didn't know what direction to turn. I didn't know how to begin. And I just came to a point where I felt okay, I don't know what to do. I don't know all the answers, even though I want to have all the answers. And I just asked for some sort of assistance to put me into a different path. I needed something to change. And I received that answer where I got the opportunity to travel and go abroad for about a year. And it literally presented itself as a fork in the road in my life. On one hand, I was dealing with my job and the fact that it was actually falling apart at the time. I was getting demoted, and I knew that I didn't want to stay in that environment that was very toxic. And then I had this other path where I could just go someplace that I've never been before with a bunch of people that I've never known before, and see where this route would take me. And so, as the saying goes, I chose the road less traveled, so to speak. I knew how my previous job would have gone, so I moved into this new path where I hopped on a plane and literally flew halfway around the world to like Southeast Asia, where I met a bunch of wonderful, very kindred spirited people, and Brooke happened to be one of them. And not just one of them, but turns out she's one of my favorite from the group. But that also led me to opening up and on so many levels all at once, where I tapped into this connection of spirituality that I didn't know how to define at the time. Like these were all things that I experienced from time to time in my youth, but because I couldn't talk to anybody about it, because it was like looked down on and shunned in my culture as like devil work and things of that nature. It was a whole a whole culture of like misunderstanding and no interest in diving deeper into these truths and different levels of experience. So in that aspect of travel, I got the opportunity to tap into this deeper sense of connection to the earth, to people, to life, to the ethers, and took up energetic practices of like Reiki, meditation, yoga, and we also had the brilliant chance of just moving through like 12 different cities for a year, and that gave me just full-on experience on like an empath level of just like meeting different energies and different pockets of people from as I moved from place to place, and it gave me perspective and understanding of people and vibes, and just knowing what it was that I was feeling and knowing how to put words to it and how to describe it so that it wasn't just something that was off or something that was troubling me, but I could categorize it and break it down and make sense of it and relay it to other people. And it even helped me in the aspect of after we finished that whole trip, I was able to return home and identify all of the things that I experienced at home with a new vocabulary to clarify that. So it was definitely a great experience that's led me into a whole new way of living that I never imagined possible. And I'm just thankful for the willingness and opportunity to live in that space of accepting what is unknown and moving forward through that, especially now in these times, because like we're dealing with this pandemic, and a lot of people are facing this kind of experience for the first time, where they're just dealing with something where they don't know what to do. They don't know where they're going to stand with their jobs, with their families, moving forward. And not to say that I'm like I'm a master of it at this point, but it's just that I've gone through a similar experience recently where I know from a deeper level that, no matter what the outcome is, as a people, as a world, like we will be okay moving forward. Like it's okay for things to fall apart, to then come back to be rebuilt again and start anew. The hard part is letting go of the thing that existed previously, you know? So I'm just very happy and very grateful. And even now, I still have a lot of work to do in my growth and in my understanding. And like, for example, like I was saying, I still find myself at times having difficulty just like making decisions, choosing to do the thing, because I am a very broad-minded person. I look at the bigger picture always, and that happens to stifle me when it comes to getting down to the minutia of taking one step at a time to get to that bigger goal that you want to achieve. So specifically this 51% practice is something that I need to very much implement into my daily life, because I personally, like, I have big goals and aspirations, and I know the things that I want to accomplish, but getting myself to take that one step at a time, to make it manifest is where I struggle from time to time. So thank you for presenting this concept, Brooke. I appreciate it. And with that, I'll let you talk, and I'll let anybody else that has anything they would like to say come on and share.
You're welcome. Well, thank you so much for sharing, Rashawn. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
Cara, we haven't heard from you yet. I'd be willing to keep the call going for a little bit longer if you wanted to speak. If not, that's totally okay too. There's absolutely no pressure. We're all at our 6 o'clock deadline. So happy to hang on for a bit longer if you want to speak, Cara. If not, I'm going to see you all next week, I hope, as well, and there'll be more time there too. But yeah, I hope that everyone here feels just a little bit less alone in their experience, and I just, it's so much sometimes just for us to share a little bit of our story out loud, and I think being able to share it with a group of connected strangers can be really powerful, because we're all here supporting each other without any of the judgments that any of the people we know kind of, come in. Sometimes it's really hard to be honest with your people, who know you best, right? Because there's a lot of judgment and fear and history that comes with that, but that's not here in this space. So I'm just very grateful to have all you here, and I'm learning with you guys, and I appreciate it. So I will see you all next week. Patty, I want to send you a little bit of information, so I'm going to send you a quick email right now, and I'll put the graph thing in there too. But you all are wonderful, and I hope you have a great rest of your Sunday. Bye.